Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the truly unhinged medicine cabinet of the Middle Ages. No, it's not just herbs and prayers. It's poppy juice, fermented madness, and things that definitely should not have been inhaled through a goat bladder. Welcome to the medieval pharmacy, where trial and error often meant you either got a little high or you died. Before we go any further into this medieval fever dream, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And if you've ever tried a medieval remedy, like drinking wine laced with powdered unicorn horn, let me know how that went. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how people in the 1300s got through their 16-hour workdays without coffee? Did they sniff something, chew something, chant something? What exactly was in those mysterious little cloth pouches everyone wore on their belts? Were they full of lavender? Or were they secretly carrying medieval meth? Why did monks keep gardens full of plants that could knock you out, make you hallucinate, or stop your heart? Was it medicine, magic, or just vibes? Would you have survived the average plague outbreak with nothing but a handful of mold and a whisper of hope? And how would you handle a headache when your only options were leeches, trepanning, or licking a toad? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in the Middle Ages. The year is 1312. Your shoes are wooden, your mouth tastes like boiled onions, and you've just been prescribed a hot cup of something called sleepy root stew. You're not sure what's in it, but you're already starting to feel a little funny. You're in a monastery garden. It's quiet, too quiet. Brother Elias hands you a cloudy little vial. It smells like overripe fruit and church incense. It's laudanum, a thick syrup made from poppy sap and wine. It was used for everything: pain, sadness, insomnia, your annoying cousin's drama. You take a sip, you float, you wonder if this is what being kissed by God feels like. And just like that, you're hooked. The monks say it helps with divine contemplation. You're not sure if it's contemplation, or just staring at the same cabbage for 3 hours, pondering the meaning of leaves. Either way, it's working. Your limbs feel like warm butter. Your brain has the consistency of mashed lentils, and the chronic ache in your lower back from sleeping on straw and guilt has disappeared. Laudanum was the medieval version of a miracle drug. Cheap, effective, and only mildly dangerous if you ignore the whole "oops, I forgot how to breathe" side effect. Let's back up for a second. Opium has been around since ancient times, but in the Middle Ages, it really found its niche, like a startup that figured out how to turn plant goo into nationwide spiritual detachment. Extracted from the dried sap of poppy pods, it was mixed with wine or vinegar and sometimes honey, because nothing says medicinal like a drug that tastes like rotting dessert. Apothecaries sold it under 100 different names: sleep syrup, the milk of the poppy, the blessed elixir. But everyone knew what it really was: an ancient coping mechanism in a bottle. You take another sip. You're not in pain, but you miss the way not being in pain felt after being in pain. That's the trap. Your cousin Elfric took laudanum for a toothache once. That was 4 months ago. He now lives in a chicken coop and calls himself Lord of the Poppies. He's doing fine, allegedly. By now you've joined the long, long line of medieval folks gently spiraling into addiction. No one's writing exposés about it. There are no pamphlets, no support groups, no dramatic musical numbers. There's just you, Brother Elias, and a growing sense that you might be a little too excited for medicine hour. To be fair, pain management in the Middle Ages wasn't exactly modern. No anesthetics, no ibuprofen, and certainly no dental insurance. People were in pain all the time: toothaches, sword wounds, plague boils, emotional trauma from making eye contact with the village executioner. Laudanum didn't fix anything. but it made you care slightly less that you were slowly dying. Let's talk about dosage for a second, or rather, the complete absence of it. Medieval medicine followed the time-honored tradition of just drink until it works, or you stop blinking. Apothecaries handed out poppy syrup like soup at a feast. Childbirth, poppy juice. Gout, poppy juice. Your goat died and you can't stop crying? Extra poppy juice. Some chronic users became so dependent they couldn't function without it. Others simply wandered off into the woods and never came back. They probably joined Elfric and his chicken cult. But again, no one really noticed, because being slightly out of it was kind of the goal. Medieval life was grim. A little chemical detachment was the only way to get through a winter with no pants, no insulation, and a neighbor who sings Gregorian chants at 4 a.m. Eventually, you learn to ration it. 1 sip before bed, 2 on feast days, 3 if you're forced to talk to your mother-in-law. It becomes part of your routine, not because you're weak, but because medieval life didn't exactly come with many soft landings. So you tilt the vial again, another drop of syrup. It tastes like regret and raisins. Your eyes flutter, your bones hum, the cabbage is still staring at you. And for now, just for now, everything is fine. You've got a headache. Naturally, someone offers you a warm cup of hemlock tea. It tastes like lawn clippings and regret. You sip it anyway, because medieval peer pressure is real. 10 minutes later, you're numb, confused, and considering confessing all your sins, even the imaginary ones. Turns out, small doses of poison were sometimes used to rebalance your humors. Mostly, they just rebalanced your chances of surviving the week. Let's talk about the logic here. Medieval medicine believed your body was ruled by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Yes, your entire well-being was apparently governed by what amounts to a medieval barista's worst smoothie. Too much of one humor? You're sick. Not enough? Still sick. Wrong combination? Definitely possessed. The solution? Herbs, leeches, fasting, and if all else failed, poison. Small, charming, experimental amounts of poison. Hemlock, also known as that plant that famously killed Socrates, was one such substance. It grew wild, looked harmless, and had just enough reputation to make it seem powerful in all the wrong ways. You weren't supposed to drink it, exactly, but also you were. Physicians used it for fevers, inflammation, and excessive thinking, which is a nice way of saying this guy's making too much sense. Please dull him down. You sip again. Your tongue tingles. Your vision goes soft around the edges, like the world is being shot through a lens smeared with badger grease. Your headache is gone, but only because the rest of your nervous system has gone offline. Congratulations, you've medically dissociated. The healer says it'll help you cool the blood. You're not sure what that means, but your fingers are definitely cold, and you're not entirely convinced your legs are still attached. Meanwhile, she's explaining how proper dosage involves listening to the earth and watching the stars. You begin to suspect no one here has actually gone to school. Let's pause here and acknowledge something. The medieval approach to pain management was a roulette wheel made of twigs, superstition, and occasional success. And when it came to headaches caused by stress, dehydration, sin, or minor demons, there weren't many options. Cold compresses, prayer, or a nice herbal tea. Unfortunately, no one ever double-checked whether the herb in question was on the will gently help you sleep list or the might end your blood circulation list. Hemlock wasn't all bad, they insisted. Just complicated. Used topically, it could numb pain. Used internally, it could purge harmful thoughts, though mostly by turning your brain into medieval oatmeal. Some monks claimed it inspired visions. Others just blacked out and woke up in entirely new monasteries. It was a gamble. But then again, so was bread. Everything in the Middle Ages was at least slightly toxic. As your teeth start to forget how teeth work, someone reads aloud from a book of herb lore that describes hemlock as cooling but dangerous. That's it. That's the guidance. Imagine a medicine label that just says, "Probably fine. Good luck." You start to wonder if this is what healing feels like, or if you're just slowly turning into soup. By this point, you've either rebalanced your humors or poisoned yourself just enough to forget what humors even are. You lie down on a hay-stuffed mattress that smells faintly of goat. Someone tucks a lavender sachet under your chin. The room spins softly, like a carousel made of anxiety and medieval dust. Tomorrow, you'll feel fine. Or dead, but probably fine. The healer will say the tea drew out the headache. You'll nod, even if you can't blink, because arguing requires energy, and you're still busy trying to remember how to swallow. So for now, you rest, wrapped in the warm embrace of questionable science, vague botany, and the strange comfort of knowing that at least no one tried to drill a hole in your head today. Yet, you're at a midsummer festival, barefoot, half-drunk on mead, and chewing something red with white spots. It's a mushroom, probably. Your teeth go numb. The stars start singing. You meet a talking dog named Reginald. This is fine. People believed hallucinogenic fungi could open doors to the spirit world. You just weren't supposed to barge through wearing nothing but a flower crown and shame. Fly agaric, also known as Amanita muscaria, if you're feeling fancy or being judged by a 13th century herbalist, was the show pony of medieval psychoactive plants. It looked like a cartoon, with its bright red cap and snowy white specks. The kind of mushroom that screams, "Don't eat me," with such confidence, people immediately assumed it had to be magical. And to be fair, it was, just not in a friendly way. Let's set the scene. It's a festival. You haven't slept in 3 days. A local shepherd offers you the mushroom with a knowing look and tells you it'll help you see the truth of things. This is not helpful. You take a bite anyway, because this is medieval Europe and the phrase, "No thank you, I don't want to ingest any more toxins today," hasn't been invented yet. The taste is earthy, slightly sour, with notes of bark, beetroot. And this was a bad idea. But before you can fully regret it, your body goes warm. The trees start to breathe. A woman in a cloak tells you the moon has been watching you specifically. And that dog? Still there, still talking, still judging your dancing. In small, extremely cautious doses, fly agaric mushrooms were used in rituals, usually pagan, occasionally medical, always slightly feral. Some believed they granted access to the spirit world, allowing communication with ancestors or gods. Others used them for visions, prophecies, or just a chaotic mental vacation from lice, famine, and the general horror of medieval dental care. But dosage was key, which is unfortunate, because medieval people measured things like a pinch, a dram, or however much fit in Brother Thomas's left hand. No one was exactly writing down milligrams. This led to experiences ranging from mild euphoria and deep introspection to 3-day vomit pilgrimages through the woods while arguing with imaginary fish. You lie back on the grass. The stars are now blinking in Morse code. You're pretty sure they're gossiping about your haircut. You try to ask the wind what it wants from you, but you forget how your mouth works. Your friends are concerned. But also, this is kind of normal. You're not the first person to have a spiritual revelation involving aggressive flowers and the sensation of being turned into a spoon. Fun fact: some Siberian shamans reportedly drank the urine of people who had consumed fly agaric because the psychedelic compounds remained active on the way out, but the more toxic bits were filtered out. So yes, in case you were wondering, someone in history not only figured that out, but decided it was worth repeating. In the countryside, folk healers sometimes dried the mushrooms and turned them into poultices for pain. It didn't always work, but it was cheaper than opium. And if you passed out mid-treatment, well, that was probably the plan anyway. Meanwhile, local clergy either condemned the mushroom as witchcraft or quietly used it during long, contemplative walks in the forest. Eventually, the trip wears off. You wake up with twigs in your hair, honey smeared across your chest, and a faint memory of reciting poetry to a tree stump you thought was your ex. Your friends hand you water and a piece of dry bread. No one mentions Reginald. You're not sure if that makes it better or worse. So you carry on. Enlightened? Maybe. Confused? Definitely. And somewhere, in the shadows of the forest, the mushrooms wait, bright, spotted, judging, ready to open the doors again if you're brave, foolish, or bored enough to knock. They call it deadly nightshade, but that hasn't stopped anyone. Especially not noble women who used Belladonna drops to dilate their pupils and look mysterious. You use it once and instantly feel like a glamorous, elegant ghost. Until you start hallucinating snakes in your soup. Belladonna was intoxicating, seductive, and just barely not deadly most of the time. You're at court. Your dress weighs approximately as much as a small ox. Your corset has fused with your spine. And your job for the day is to sit still, blink slowly, and look like you know something no one else does. It's the 14th century equivalent of Instagram thirst traps. But instead of filters and ring lights, you've got a tiny bottle of poison and a prayer that your eyeballs don't fall out. You tip your head back and drop a single glistening bead into each eye. It burns. A lot. But pain is beauty, and you've got a banquet to attend. Within minutes, your pupils swell wide, black and bottomless. You look ethereal, haunted, and slightly confused. Vision? A little fuzzy. Balance? Optional. But mystique? Off the charts. Belladonna, meaning beautiful woman in Italian, earned its name because someone, somewhere, decided that almost blind, dazed women were peak hotness. It was all the rage in Renaissance Italy, but its roots go back further. The plant itself is elegant, dark berries, purple bell-shaped flowers, and an aura of absolute menace. Every part of it, leaves, berries, roots, is toxic. Even brushing against it too long can make your skin tingle like a poorly cast love spell. And yet people kept using it, not just for vanity, either. Healers and herbalists prescribed it for muscle spasms, ulcers, gout, and occasionally hysteria, which is old-timey for she's feeling feelings again. In tiny doses, it numbed pain. In larger doses, it caused delirium, confusion, and death. But hey, at least your eyes looked good while you went. You wander into the feast hall swaying slightly. Not from the wine, from the Belladonna. Everyone is very impressed. Or alarmed. Hard to say. You can't quite make out faces anymore, just smudges of candlelight and vague judgment. Someone hands you a bowl of soup. You lean in, it hisses. You blink. There's a snake in it. Or maybe a spoon. Either way, you suddenly don't feel like eating anymore. The nobleman next to you whispers that Belladonna is also used in love potions, which explains why he's sweating and won't stop singing to the roast pig. Witches, midwives, and women on the fringes of society often used Belladonna in their concoctions. It was believed to open the mind, lift the veil between worlds, and maybe make your husband stop talking for 5 minutes. But using it risked being accused of sorcery, or at the very least, poor decision-making. Outside the court, soldiers sometimes used Belladonna before battle. Just enough to feel bold. Just enough to dull fear. You'd think hallucinating during a sword fight would be a disadvantage, but apparently, so would being sober while charging into 30 armored men on horseback. You excuse yourself early and wander into the garden, guided by instinct, moonlight, and a mild sense of dissociation. The night air is crisp. The flowers look like they're breathing. You hum a lullaby you're pretty sure you don't know. The moon winks at you, or maybe that's just your left eye giving up. The effects wear off by morning, mostly. Your pupils return to normal. You stop seeing phantoms in the drapes. But you miss that ghostly feeling. The lightness, the glamour, the quiet promise that you were part of something strange and beautiful and just a little bit dangerous. So next week, you'll do it again. Just one drop, maybe two, because being a woman in the Middle Ages isn't about safety. It's about looking stunning while being mildly poisoned. And in that sense, Belladonna delivers every time. You dig it up at midnight, wearing a tunic soaked in goat urine, because that's apparently necessary. The root looks like a tiny, angry man. It screams. You scream. Everyone screams. Then you boil it, drink it, and time turns into soup. Mandrake was used for pain, sleep, and magical nonsense. Also, it might make you see demons, or become one. Let's back up. Mandrake root wasn't just a plant, it was an experience. According to medieval law, it grew only beneath gallows, nourished by the bodily fluids of hanged men, already off to a great start. And if you pulled one out of the ground without proper ceremony, or a protective charm, or a dog on a rope, or a legally binding apology to the spirits, it would scream loud enough to kill you. Yes, kill you. That was the rumor anyway, which didn't stop anyone. It just made the process more theatrical. Here's how it worked. First, you soak yourself in goat pee to mask your scent, because mandrakes are apparently picky. Then, under the light of the full moon, you whisper some Latin, draw a protective circle, and tie the root to a dog. Then get this. You walk away and call the dog. The root yanks free, the dog gets spooked, and you pretend that no one just committed botanical war crimes in the garden. Then comes the fun part. Preparation. The root, often shaped vaguely like a tiny human, is chopped up, boiled in wine, and transformed into a potion. People drank it to numb pain, knock themselves out before surgery, or as a sedative when their gout got too dramatic. Sometimes they just chewed a piece raw, because subtlety was not exactly a medieval strength. You, of course, drink the potion, because your back hurts, your head hurts, your soul hurts, and frankly, you're curious. At first, nothing happens. Then everything happens. Time folds in on itself. Your hands feel far away. A nearby rock calls you by name. You're unsure whether you've reached enlightenment or just misidentified your own shoes. Mandrake had alkaloids, specifically hyoscyamine and scopolamine, which in modern terms means congratulations, your neurotransmitters are no longer invited to the party. It caused hallucinations, delirium, and in larger doses, unconsciousness. In slightly larger doses, you simply stopped being alive. So you had to guess carefully. Witches loved mandrake. So did healers, mystics, and anyone trying to brew a potion with a dramatic ingredient list. It featured heavily in flying ointments, sleep tonics, and love potions. Some even believed mandrake roots could speak, move, or curse you if you mistreated them, which is why you now store yours in a little box, on a velvet cushion, and apologize to it when you sneeze. The church, of course, was suspicious. Anything that made you dream about floating over mountains or seeing your dead grandfather playing the lute was immediately flagged as probably Satan. But mandrake existed in a weird grey area, too powerful to ignore, too useful to ban, too loud to sneak up on. At this point, you've used it a few times. Once for a toothache. Once for heartbreak. Once because your friend dared you. Each time, the world got quieter, weirder, and briefly very sparkly. And even though the screaming still echoes in your memory like a tiny root-based trauma, you keep coming back to it, because in a world of filth, famine, and the daily possibility of being stepped on by a horse, mandrake offered something unusual: escape, not just from pain, but from reality. A sip of something ancient, a footstep into the other world, a screaming vegetable that made you feel just a little less human. And maybe that was the point. So you tuck your little root man back into his velvet-lined box, whisper goodnight, and promise not to boil him again until the next full moon, unless, of course, your gout comes back. Then all bets are off. You wake up next to a barrel. You don't know if you slept there or if it's your new house. People drank beer, wine, and mead daily. Not for fun, but because water was a public health hazard. Alcohol was mild, but chronic. Being slightly buzzed was just part of life. Like shoes made of straw or taxes paid in chickens. Let's start with the basics. Medieval water could kill you. Rivers were toilets. Wells were suspicious. Bathwater was a team sport, and not in a good way. So instead, everyone turned to what historians affectionately call small beer. It had low alcohol content, was mildly fermented, and tasted like someone tried to brew tea using barley and self-doubt. But it was safer than water, and honestly, it got the job done. You stumble into your morning routine. Someone hands you a clay mug full of something warm and foamy. It's not coffee. It's barely beer. It's breakfast. Children drink it. Monks drink it. Pregnant women drink it. It's hydration, nutrition, and mild sedation all in one bitter gulp. If you're wealthier, you get wine. Probably red. Probably sour. Probably served in a goblet that smells like pewter and regret. Peasants drank ale, unfiltered, dark, and made in batches that ranged from pleasantly tangy to this might be soup now. Mead, a fermented honey drink, was also popular, especially during festivals or after realizing your husband has tracked mud across the straw floor again. And then there were the brewers, mostly women, especially in villages, known as alewives. They made the magic happen. They had their own recipes, their own herbs, and sometimes their own suspiciously pointy hats. Brewing was a domestic art, passed down like bread recipes or gossip. And yes, some of them were later accused of witchcraft. Because nothing says threatening woman like someone who can make beer and own property. By mid-morning, your head is buzzing gently, like a fly trapped in a cheesecloth. It's fine, you're functional, sort of. This level of ambient intoxication is normal, expected even. You go to work, ploughing fields, shoeing horses, thatching roofs, and hope your coordination holds. Everyone's in the same boat. It's not about being drunk. It's about being hydrated, with a mild side of tipsy. Let's talk variety. There was small beer for daily drinking, strong ale for celebrations, and monastic brews made by monks who accidentally discovered how to make 10% ABV and then insisted it was for fasting. Spoiler: monks were often the best brewers in Europe. Nothing says piety like brewing a golden ale that makes you forget Latin. But alcohol wasn't just social. It was medicinal. Got a fever? Warm wine? Toothache? Rinse with mead. Sad? Because your life expectancy is 35? Try brandy if you're lucky enough to live near a distillery. Alcohol was disinfectant, an anesthetic, and a therapy. Sometimes all at once. You attend a wedding. There's music, a roasted pig, and 5 different barrels. By the end, someone's trying to dance with the town bell. You don't stop them. You respect the tradition. On holy days and feast days, the drinking ramps up because you're either celebrating a miracle or coping with a plague, and when it's all over, you crawl back to your barrel, which, yes, may in fact be your new house now. Hangovers? Yes. Regrets? Constant. Solutions? More ale. So you live your life just slightly sloshed. You raise your mug to the sky, nod to the pig in the corner, and take another sip of safety. Because in the Middle Ages, alcohol wasn't a vice, it was a survival strategy. A liquid buffer between you and a world full of fleas, famine, and really bad dental hygiene. And honestly, it's working. Sort of. Probably. Good enough. Cheers. You chew a handful of dried fennel seeds to settle your nerves. A nun tells you it's good for memory, digestion, and warding off evil spirits. You're not sure if you're healing or seasoning yourself for dinner. Herbal remedies were everywhere. Some worked. Some just made your breath smell like medieval toothpaste. Let's be clear. This isn't fennel in a trendy salad. This is fennel from a dusty clay jar in a drafty monastery, grown in a garden where nothing thrives except weeds and spiritual dread. It crunches like dry gravel, tastes like licorice if licorice had body odor, and you're pretty sure it's 60% dust. But still, you keep chewing, because Sister Hildegard said it would calm your anxiety. And you do have anxiety. Mostly about lice, taxes, and the suspicious lump growing behind your ear. Fennel was one of those miracle herbs, allegedly good for everything. Digestion, bloating, bad breath, hexes, jealousy, plague prevention, and the windiness of the womb, which is not something you want to have explained to you. Monks wrote about it in herbals. Healers passed it down in recipes. Midwives whispered about it in corners. Nobody really questioned it. Because in an age where most medical treatment involved knives and prayer, fennel at least didn't scream or bleed. Next to it on the shelf, anise, another licorice, adjacent seed that people insisted would cure hiccups, nightmares, melancholy, and maybe the occasional existential crisis. You pop a few into your mouth, hoping for enlightenment, or at least relief from the medieval diet of turnips and sadness. They taste slightly sweeter than fennel, but still very much like you've wandered into the spice cabinet by mistake. These herbs weren't just flavoring, they were culture, carried along ancient trade routes, handed out by apothecaries, blessed by priests, and sometimes rubbed on doorways to keep out demons, tax collectors, or Greg from the next village who just won't take a hint. People burned them as incense, stuffed them into their shoes, sewed them into pillows, and brewed them into weak teas that mostly tasted like disappointment and hope. And here's where it gets spicy, literally and metaphorically. These seeds, while seemingly innocent, actually contain mild psychoactive compounds. Not enough to make you see the Virgin Mary in your stew, but enough to affect your brain in subtle ways. Fennel has compounds that can gently soothe your nerves and reduce inflammation. Anise contains a chemical called anethole, which mimics estrogen and was believed to help regulate mood, and let's just say bodily balance. It's herbal biohacking. The medieval version of a microdose. You sit in the garden, chewing your seeds, watching the chickens fight over a beetle, and begin to feel calmer. Not good, exactly, but less likely to yell at the wind. Sister Hildegard walks by and compliments your aura. You're not sure what that means, but you accept it. The sun feels warm. Your intestines are no longer staging a rebellion. For a moment, you believe in herbalism, and maybe in Sister Hildegard's mysterious glowing hands. Of course, not everyone used fennel and anise for health. Some stuffed it into plague masks. Some blended it into potions sold by charlatans in marketplaces who swore it could cure baldness and heartbreak. Spoiler, it couldn't. But at least it didn't kill you, which in medieval medicine made it a top-tier treatment. You head to bed with your mouth full of fragrant seeds and your heart full of tentative optimism. You don't know if you're protected from evil spirits, but your breath is minty fresh by 14th century standards. And you haven't cried once today. So, you sleep, herbal, slightly spiced, and moderately confused. Just another day in a world where the line between food, medicine, and folklore was as blurry as your vision after one too many fennel teas. A monk sprinkles a spicy-smelling powder into your palm. You sniff. It burns your sinuses, but suddenly you feel calm. Or maybe you just can't breathe. Some monks believed holy incense could clear the mind, open the soul, and cure bad vibes. It was religious Red Bull, with a hint of sandalwood and divine judgment. This isn't incense like the stuff you burn while deep cleaning your apartment on a Sunday afternoon. This is the powdered, weaponized version. Crushed frankincense, pulverized myrrh, a dust so holy, so aromatic, it could either connect you to the divine or permanently clear your sinuses with one heroic inhale. Either way, you weren't sneezing because of allergies. You were sneezing for God. Monasteries in the Middle Ages were deeply invested in scents. They believed smells could influence the soul, drive out demons, and purify the air, especially when that air was shared with 30 other monks who bathed once per season and mostly ate boiled cabbage. Incense wasn't just symbolic. It was survival and occasionally recreational. You're sitting in the corner of a stone chapel. Gregorian chants echo through the arches. A monk in itchy robes hands you a cloth-wrapped bundle filled with crushed aromatic herbs. You're told to breathe deeply and let the spirit enter. You're not sure which spirit. You're hoping it's a chill one. You take a cautious sniff. The scent hits you like theological lightning. Notes of cinnamon, clove, pine resin, and someone accidentally added pepper. Your eyes water. Your brain momentarily forgets how to alphabet. But then, peace. Or at least, a deeply disoriented stillness that feels kind of like peace. You can't feel your nose anymore, and that's probably fine. This powdered incense was a blend of sacred tradition and medieval improvisation. The church loved frankincense, expensive, imported, and slightly suspicious, but monks often added whatever they had. Dried rose petals, bay leaves, mint, and occasionally things they couldn't identify but assumed were holy because they glowed under moonlight. It was believed that breathing in these sacred scents could cleanse the soul, open one's heart to divine wisdom, and suppress unholy thoughts, which was a polite way of saying please stop fantasizing about Brother Eustace during morning prayer. For monks, who took vows of silence, celibacy, and sometimes not blinking too hard, this ritual was one of the few sensory pleasures available, a little spicy sniff to keep the demons and boredom at bay. But of course, some people took it too far. You begin to notice certain monks get very into incense rituals. They volunteer for extra shifts at the altar. They hover suspiciously close to the storage cabinet. Brother Gilbert hasn't blinked in 6 hours and keeps reciting psalms in reverse. It's unclear whether he's enlightened or just extremely mentholated. And outside the monastery, it spreads. Traveling preachers, mystics, even nobles start using powdered incense as a daily pick-me-up. Some apply it like snuff, pinching it between their fingers and sniffing with the elegance of someone trying very hard not to sneeze in public. Others dab it onto prayer beads, robes, or, in some cases, directly into their mouths, which is a quick way to meet your maker, aromatically speaking. There were skeptics, of course. Some physicians warned that inhaling too much resin dust could dry out your brain. Others claimed it caused hallucinations. One French monk swore he saw the Virgin Mary in a cloud of sandalwood and promptly walked into a well, but for many, it was just another tool in the spiritual medicine cabinet. Right next to fasting, flagellation, and pretending you didn't hear that ghost whispering Latin behind the altar. You finish your session in the chapel. Your thoughts are strangely quiet. Your hands are warm. You've either had a religious awakening or a mild allergic reaction. Either way, you're ready for Vespers. So you bow your head, sniff the sacred spice one more time, and whisper a quiet prayer, not for salvation, but for stronger lungs. Because in the Middle Ages, faith wasn't just about belief. Sometimes it was about huffing powdered incense in a candlelit hallway, while a choir sang ominous harmonies in the background. And honestly, it worked. Sort of. Probably. Amen. You're not supposed to lick the toad. So you do. Now you're in a field, communing with the moon, speaking fluent crow. People whispered that witches made ointments from toad venom, flying around in trances or naked panic. Whether real or not, the myth gave people an excuse to get weird, and very, very high. Let's start with the toad itself, plump, grumpy, and oozing mystery. The European toad wasn't just a pond-side decoration, it was a pharmacy in a warty little suit. The goo it secreted, especially from those lovely swollen parotid glands near the eyes, contained a cocktail of chemicals like bufotenin. Yes, the same stuff found in psychedelic plants and, oddly enough, human brains. Nature clearly wanted someone to get weird with this, so you find the toad. Or rather, the toad finds you. You're deep in the forest, with a satchel full of herbs, a questionable moral compass, and the general vibe of someone who's about 5 minutes away from being accused of heresy. The toad croaks. You nod respectfully, and then, because you're spiritually curious and deeply unsupervised, you collect a bit of that sticky, glistening venom for later, or now. Witches, real, imagined, or somewhere in between, were said to use this venom in flying ointments. These were greasy pastes made from herbs, animal fats, and things that should never go near human skin. You'd rub the ointment on your wrists, your temples, your broomstick. Yes, that broomstick, and wait for the visions to begin. No flight tickets necessary. Just a trippy, full-sensory trip powered by botany and poor judgment. You apply the ointment. It smells like mint, regret, and whatever was in that jar before you cleaned it with a stick. The world gets slow. Your body feels detached, floaty, like your bones have slipped into another time zone. You look at your hand. It looks back. You are now, undeniably, not sober. This was the core of the legend. That witches could fly. Not on brooms necessarily, but through vivid, hallucinatory journeys. They saw demons, spirits, visions of divine reckoning and baked goods that told secrets. Some believed the ointment helped their souls leave their bodies while their physical forms snoozed quietly in barns or on mossy stones. Others just had a moment. Of course, most people weren't technically witches, but the allure of toad ointment spread. Some tried it for pain, others for prophecy. A few because medieval life was essentially a horror game with no save points and you had to make your own fun. For many women, especially herbalists and midwives, these practices blurred the line between medicine and myth, until a neighbor saw you talking to a lizard and called the local inquisitor. The church, unsurprisingly, was not a fan. Trances, naked rituals, conversations with moonbeams and owls, that's witchcraft. Or Tuesday, depending on your vibe. But the paranoia ran deep. Entire manuals were written about toad magic, detailing ingredients, side effects, and what to do if your grandmother starts levitating during dinner. Still, the stories endured. And so did the practice, quietly, in corners. You didn't need wings. Just curiosity, a mortar and pestle, and a firm belief that the frog wasn't judging you too hard. Now back to you. The trance fades. You're lying in a field, face covered in dirt, clutching a daisy you've named Gregory. The toad is gone. So is your memory of the last 3 hours. But your skin feels tingly, your thoughts are oddly sharp, and you're 63% sure you unlocked a new language only trees understand. You walk home barefoot, slightly glowing, smelling like herbs and crimes. People ask what you were doing. You smile and say you were praying. Sort of true. You prayed. You soared. You licked the toad. And if that's not medieval medicine, what is? You steep it like tea. It smells like licorice and something rotting. You drink it. You black out. You wake up 3 days later in a field, covered in honey and someone else's socks. Henbane was used in potions and anesthesia. It also caused amnesia, hallucinations, and terrible life decisions. Henbane. Hyoscyamus niger, if you're fancy, or just that plant that ruins family dinners if you're a medieval herbalist, was the go-to herb when you needed to knock someone out, stop pain, or completely erase your sense of time and space. It looked like a cursed dandelion's evil cousin, spiky, hairy leaves. pale yellow flowers veined with purple and a smell that suggested it was halfway between medicine and something a raccoon might throw up. But it worked. Kind of. You're handed a mug of it by a traveling healer named Old Maud. She tells you it'll help with your aching joints. Or maybe your broken heart. She's vague. She also has no eyebrows and smells faintly of burning linen. But you trust her. Because pain is exhausting. And this tea is warm. The first few sips are earthy. The next few are wrong. Your tongue goes numb. Your heartbeat starts playing jazz. The world goes a bit sideways. Then everything disappears. Henbane didn't mess around. It contained powerful alkaloids, like scopolamine and hyoscyamine, that acted on the nervous system. In small doses, it could dull pain. In larger doses, it could produce visions, delirium, and memory loss. It was used by doctors before surgery, by witches in flying ointments, and by bored nobles who wanted to impress party guests with their ability to forget how hands worked. You wake up on the third day. You're in a field. Your boots are missing. Someone's carved a poem into your forearm in what appears to be blackberry juice. A local farmer waves at you like you're an old friend. You have no idea who he calls you Queen of the Crows. You don't correct him, and now, the slow unraveling begins. You try to retrace your steps. You find a goat with a ribbon tied around its horn. A small pile of garlic. A wooden spoon lodged in a tree trunk. This was clearly not a restful nap. But your back feels better, your headache is gone, and your mouth still tastes like regret and licorice. Henbane wasn't all chaos. It had its uses. Physicians boiled it into salves for toothaches, gout, and surgical prep. Monks recorded its medicinal value in dusty herbals with warnings like may cause the sufferer to converse with unseen beasts. That's monk speak for you might accidentally join a cult mid-trance. It also played a key role in love potions, because nothing says romance like a temporary lapse in identity. Some lovers mixed it into wine to weaken resistance, a phrase that should never ever return to fashion. Others used it to mimic death, especially during plague times, when a dramatic swoon could buy you some solitude and a 3-day nap. Of course, Henbane was also associated with witchcraft. Anything that made you forget who you were or speak in riddles was immediately deemed suspicious. One woman in 1390 claimed she used henbane to fly to a Sabbath, only to wake up on her roof covered in moss and clutching a ladle. The court found her guilty of witchcraft and poor gardening. You make it back to the village, sort of. Your walk is more of a sideways meander, and you're still wearing someone else's socks. But you're smiling, because for all its madness, henbane gave you something rare in the Middle Ages, temporary escape. A pause, a reset. Even if it came with bees, nudity, and mild social exile, you vow never to take it again. And by that, of course, you mean you'll probably try it next week, just to see if you can remember your real name this time. You're sick. The kind of sick that makes your neighbors start digging your grave just in case. A man with a bird mask arrives. His beak is filled with herbs, lavender, mint, cloves. Not to help you, just to stop him from smelling death. But you breathe it in anyway, because it's the closest thing to aromatherapy you've got. This is the 14th century. Germ theory doesn't exist. Microscopes haven't been invented. No one has Purell. People still think diseases float around in the air like moody ghosts. So if something smells bad, it must be poisonous. If something smells good, it must be protective. That's the logic. It's not correct, but it is committed. Enter the plague doctor. Long black robes, wide-brimmed hat, leather gloves, and that iconic mask that makes him look like a haunted goose. But the beak isn't for style. It's a medieval air filter. Inside the snout, a personalized blend of herbs and spices, basically a wearable sachet, potpourri with purpose. The recipe varied, but popular choices included rose petals, camphor, wormwood, juniper, and about 15 kinds of mint. Some added cinnamon, others got weird and included crushed emeralds or vinegar-soaked bread. Anything to stop the smell of plague, which was said to include blood, pus, fear, and whatever was leaking from your neighbor's boil this morning. And you? Lying in bed, drenched in fever sweat, surrounded by onions and desperation, you get a whiff of that fragrant birdman. And for a moment it's beautiful. You smell lavender. Real lavender. Not moldy floor rushes pretending to be clean. You inhale deeply. Is this what heaven smells like? Or just the last thing you'll ever smell? To be clear, the herbs in the mask weren't there to heal you. They were there to protect him. Because plague doctors weren't dumb, they were just working with limited data and a lot of bravado. They believed in miasma theory, the idea that bad air caused disease. So if they could breathe through a bouquet of crushed herbs, they might just survive the day without catching your particular brand of terminal. And sometimes the placebo helped. The scent was calming. The herbs had mild antibacterial properties. The aroma masked the rot. It gave people a sense, however false, that something was being done. That they weren't just waiting to die while being stared at by a man who looked like he'd been designed by a crow and a trauma counselor. There were other scent-based tricks too. People carried pomanders, little metal balls filled with spices. They burned incense in sick rooms, stuffed dried flowers into masks, and even boiled vinegar with herbs just to steam out the bad air. No one had antibiotics, but everyone had mint. Meanwhile, back in your bed, you're feeling different, not better, just slightly more awake. The room smells like a spice market and a funeral. The doctor mutters something about balancing your humors and checks your pulse by pressing one gloved finger to your forehead and dramatically nodding. He leaves you with a small pouch of herbs to sniff when the fever spikes. It includes rosemary, thyme, and what might be a bit of old sock. You thank him. He doesn't answer. He's already walking down the street like a grim aromatherapist on a deadline. By the next day, your fever breaks. Or doesn't. You're either healing or floating toward the afterlife on a lavender-scented breeze. But you keep the pouch anyway, tied around your neck. A tiny fragment of hope in a world full of coughing, chaos, and the general belief that if it smells nice, it probably works. And maybe that's enough. Because in the Middle Ages, medicine wasn't about certainty. It was about rituals, herbs, faith, and doing something, anything, to feel like you hadn't already lost. And if that meant sniffing the beak of a bird-masked stranger while wondering if your spleen was melting, so be it. Your apothecary gives you a poultice that smells like your college roommate's sock drawer. It's hemp, ground, boiled, sometimes smoked. Medieval people didn't know why it worked, they just knew it helped. And no one questioned the village weaver, who always looked suspiciously relaxed. Cannabis had been quietly vibing through history for centuries before the Middle Ages. In the medieval world, it wasn't so much a party drug as it was a multi-tool, think duct tape, but leafy. The fibers made rope, cloth, paper, and sails. The seeds were turned into oil, the leaves, medicinal, of course. And if a few folks happened to accidentally overheat it near a smoky fire and spend the afternoon laughing at chickens, well, that was just bonus therapy. Let's start with the apothecary. He's a man with questionable hygiene and a hat that may or may not be alive. He hands you a jar filled with a greenish-brown paste. You ask what it's for. He says swelling, melancholy, aching joints and demons in the head. You nod like this is normal, because it island. You apply the poultice to your sore ankle. It's warm, sticky, and smells faintly like compost and optimism. Within minutes, the pain dulls. You sit by the hearth, and suddenly the fire looks very interesting. Someone nearby is singing, but it's just one note, over and over, for 15 minutes. You don't mind. You feel calm, relaxed, contemplative, possibly one with the furniture. Cannabis in the Middle Ages was mainly consumed medicinally, ground into powders, steeped into teas, mixed into salves. Physicians recommended it for pain relief, appetite stimulation, insomnia, and, yes, excess of black bile, which is medieval shorthand for you're sad and no one knows what to do about it. It was also considered helpful for gout, which means it was extremely popular with nobles who had access to both cannabis and an entire diet based on salted meat and pride. But the fun didn't stop there. In some regions, cannabis was burned in spiritual rituals. Sufi mystics in the Islamic world used it to achieve altered states of consciousness, though not everyone approved. Meanwhile, in parts of Europe, it was used less ceremonially and more like background seasoning. A little hemp in your stew, a little hemp in your ale, a little hemp in your bread because you heard it makes you dream about flying sheep. Nothing fancy, just vibes. You walk past the village weaver. She hasn't moved in 4 hours. Her loom is silent. She's staring at a beetle like it's reciting poetry. She offers you a puff from a strange, hand-rolled herb stick. You decline, but not very convincingly. 10 minutes later, you're laying in a haystack, debating whether God invented clouds or clouds invented God. And yes, while cannabis wasn't exactly recreational in the medieval Christian West, no one was throwing weed raves in cathedrals. Its effects were noted, appreciated, and quietly passed around. Monks were more likely to use it in balms. Peasants may have burned it without fully knowing what they were doing. And merchants? Well, some of them knew exactly what they were doing and charged extra for it. You wake up from a nap you didn't remember starting. Your ankle feels better. You're hungry for bread. Everything smells like hay and peace. You wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's something sacred about this plant after all. Of course, the church would later frown upon anything that made you feel too good without suffering first. But by then, the plant had already made its mark, woven into textiles, healing balms, and some guy's deeply emotional poem about a cloud that looked like a goose. So next time someone tells you cannabis is a modern invention, remind them that medieval people were using it centuries ago, before it was cool, regulated, or even understood. It was a leaf, a medicine, a mystery, and occasionally a portal to very weird dreams. You're sipping mead while someone plays the hurdy-gurdy. It's warm. It's fuzzy. You might be in love with a tree. Alcohol was medicine, social glue, and emotional escape. It was also how peasants made winter bearable, one mug at a time. Let's paint the scene. It's a late November evening in the medieval countryside. The air smells like smoke, wet wool, and the unmistakable tang of a pig you didn't know was still alive until it sneezed behind the barn. Your hands are numb. Your toes are theoretical. But in your cup, liquid gold. Mead, sweet, fermented honey wine, thick enough to coat your insides like a medieval emotional support blanket. Winter in the Middle Ages was brutal. No insulation, no central heating, no TikTok to distract you from the crushing awareness of mortality. Just long nights, cold floors, and the creeping realization that your cousin is eating all the preserved turnips. So you drink, not to forget, well, okay, partly to forget, but mostly to survive. Mead was a favorite in regions where honey was abundant, or at least hoarded by someone with a beard and opinions about bees. It was sticky, mildly alcoholic, and deeply satisfying. Peasants, nobles, monks, everyone drank it. If wine was for the rich and ale was for the daily grind, mead was for vibes. Ale, on the other hand, was the daily go-to, brewed in batches by alewives, often the women of the village who doubled as bartenders, gossip hubs, and unofficial therapists. It was nourishing, cheap, and usually safe to drink. It didn't always taste great, but that wasn't the point. Ale didn't need to win awards. It just needed to be wet, vaguely bubbly, and not immediately fatal. And it worked. The moment you sip it, your shoulders unclench, your nose warms, your neighbor starts playing the hurdy-gurdy, an instrument that sounds like a bagpipe making polite conversation with a kazoo, and suddenly it's perfect. The fire crackles. Bread is shared. Someone starts dancing, but not well. You forget that your boots are made of recycled sheep. You feel good, or at least less bad. And that's a win. Alcohol in medieval times wasn't about getting trashed, though that did happen, especially during festivals, weddings, or Tuesdays. It was about comfort, coping, a way to push through the damp, the cold, and the chronic joint pain caused by carrying buckets of water up a hill 4 times a day. It was medicine, and in many cases, actually listed in medical texts. Monks recorded recipes for medicinal beers, apothecaries prescribed wine for melancholy, and local healers rubbed mead on wounds, which was probably not useful but definitely made the wound happier. You refill your mug. It's stronger this time. More honey, more herbs. Someone added a cinnamon stick, which is either a luxurious treat or a splinter hazard. Your head feels floaty. Your face feels warm. You tell a joke that isn't funny. But everyone laughs, because the collective buzz has made the whole world a little softer around the edges. And then there's the emotional part. You know, the reason we really drink. Someone sings a sad ballad about a goose that died nobly in battle. A girl next to you starts crying. A man to your left proposes to a mug. You nod solemnly. You get it. That mug has been there for you, too. You drink because it's tradition, because it's community, because if you have to listen to the wind howl through the thatch roof one more night without something sweet and numbing in your belly, you'll scream. But you don't scream, you sip. You sway. You smile at the tree again. The feeling might not last, but for tonight, it's enough. And in the Middle Ages, sometimes enough was the greatest miracle of all. You're sitting in a wooden shed over a bubbling sulfur spring. The fumes sting your eyes. You smell like an egg that went to therapy. But you feel weirdly better? Sulfur baths were thought to purge illness, or at least terrify it out of your body with violent stink. This is what passed for a spa in the Middle Ages. A smoke-filled hut with a suspicious puddle, a questionable robe, and a bucket of shame water. Your host is a local healer named Mana, who hasn't blinked in 20 minutes and insists that the gods of the underworld live under the spring. She's cheerful. You're concerned, but sulfur, known as brimstone back then, was prized. Not because it was pleasant, it wasn't. It smelled like rot, cooked cabbage, and betrayal, but because it had power. It bubbled up from the depths of the earth, hissing and steaming, like some unholy potion brewed by Mother Nature's goth phase. People believed it could cleanse the skin, detox the body, and drive out illness through the sheer force of noxious horror. So, here you are, half naked on a wooden stool suspended over what is essentially the mouth of hell. The fumes rise up, clawing at your sinuses, peeling your soul, and gently cooking your lower body like a sad egg soufflé. You gag, you sweat, you blink through the sting. Mana claps and says, "It's working," and weirdly it is. Your joints feel looser. Your headache retreats. The mystery rash on your ankle is either healed or so overwhelmed by the sulfur that it's given up. Medieval people were onto something. Sort of. Sulfur does have antimicrobial properties. It was used to treat skin conditions like scabies, eczema, and whatever boil madness was. Today, we call it topical treatment. Back then, it was more inhalational trauma. These bathhouses were common in towns, lucky or unlucky, enough to have geothermal springs. They popped up near volcanoes, fault lines, or places where the earth just gave up a little. Towns built entire economies around them. Sick nobles, aching peasants, traveling monks, they all came to stew. You paid a fee, stripped down, and hoped the fumes didn't steal your name. Some took the full plunge, literally soaking in the sulfur water until their skin turned pruny and their lungs considered unionizing. Others opted for the steam treatment, which basically meant sitting in a wooden box while your pores cried. It was a shared experience, often done communally, which meant that not only were you steaming your filth away, but you were also doing it shoulder to shoulder with a sweaty stranger named Bernard. For many, sulfur wasn't just a remedy, it was a reset, a punishment for sin, a ritual of purification. You'd go in diseased, depressed, possibly haunted, and emerge clean, mildly pickled, and spiritually reborn, or at least extremely dehydrated. Mana hands you a wooden cup filled with cleansing tea, which smells like dandelions and regret. You sip it. It tastes like rainwater filtered through a sock. She nods approvingly. You now belong to the spring. Whatever that means. Outside, the townsfolk are lined up, waiting for their turn. Some look hopeful, others are already gagging in anticipation. But everyone believes, because when you live in a world of plagues, curses, and drafty housing, you cling to whatever relief you can find. Even if it means huffing brimstone until your ancestors show up for a chat. You step out of the shed, skin flushed, hair damp, smelling like a cursed breakfast, but you feel lighter, cleaner, confused, sure, but also refreshed in the way only true, sulfur-scorched suffering can provide. Was it science? Was it magic? Was it just a medieval gas chamber with good marketing? Doesn't matter. You survived your spa day in hell. And honestly, you'd do it again. Maybe bring a clothespin next time. You lie still as a man with a rusty drill says something about releasing the demons. Medieval doctors believed in drilling holes into skulls to let out bad spirits. People survived this. Some claimed to feel better. Others probably just stopped complaining out of fear. Welcome to trepanning. Also known as, "Why are you doing this to my head?" It was one of the oldest medical procedures in human history, still clinging to life in the Middle Ages like a half-remembered fever dream. The logic was simple. You have a headache, seizure, depression, or bad vibes. Clearly, your skull is too full. Let's open a window. There's no anesthesia. There's no sterile field. There's just you, a very old wooden table, and a man named Brother Peter who has exactly 2 qualifications. He once saw someone else do this, and he believes in angels. The tools, bone saws, chisels, hand drills, possibly borrowed from a carpenter, possibly still covered in someone else's sins. The procedure? A small circular section of your skull is slowly, carefully shaved or drilled away until there's a literal hole in your head. Congratulations, you are now more ventilated than the average medieval castle. The goal was to let out pressure, or spirits, or both. Because back then, the brain wasn't understood as an organ, it was more like an unruly roommate that caused trouble when left unchecked. If you were hearing voices, shaking uncontrollably, or just generally too moody, trepanning was offered as a cure, not a suggestion. A cure. The first thing you feel is panic, the second is pain, the third is nothing, maybe numbness, maybe divine intervention, maybe your soul temporarily leaving your body to grab a snack and come back later. And here's the weirdest part. People survived this. Not everyone, obviously. Some patients died of infection, others bled out, but plenty made it through. In fact, skulls have been found with clear signs of healing around the trepanned hole, meaning the person lived for weeks, months, even years afterward. Some of them even got it done multiple times. Afterward, the doctor, or barber, or blacksmith, or concerned uncle plugs the hole with wax, cloth, or sometimes just leaves it open to the breeze. You're bandaged, blessed, and told to rest, which is difficult. since your head now makes a whistling sound every time you turn too quickly. People claimed it helped. Migraines went away. Seizures lessened. One man reported that after trepanning, he could hear God more clearly, which might have been the wind echoing through his cranial skylight. But still, it counted as improvement. Some even wanted it. Nobles, knights, soldiers, anyone who'd suffered a head injury in battle and needed the pressure released. And in a culture where mental illness was often seen as spiritual possession, having a hole in your head was oddly comforting. It meant you were trying. It meant the demons had an exit route. Of course, not everyone trusted the process. Priests debated its morality. Midwives whispered alternatives. Villagers stared at your bandaged head and made the sign of the cross. But you're just glad to be alive. Dizzier than usual, but alive. The days pass. The pain fades. Your dreams are strange, but your headaches are gone. Probably because your brain is too afraid to act up again. So you walk through the village with a slightly lighter skull and a new reputation as someone who's not to be trifled with. You've survived medieval neurosurgery using tools better suited for building shelves. And if that's not resilience, what is? You meet a woman with too many scarves and a suspiciously deep knowledge of plants. She gives you a sachet to hang around your neck. You sneeze for 4 days, but your back stops hurting. Probably coincidence. Or maybe she's a genius. Or maybe she's a witch. It's hard to tell. These women, sometimes called wise women, herb wives, or if the local priest was in a mood, agents of Satan, were the walking encyclopedias of medieval medicine. Long before pharmacies and WebMD, if your joints ached or your humours felt off, you didn't go to a doctor. You went to someone who smelled like basil, dried sage, and mild suspicion. And that someone probably lived on the edge of the village, owned at least one angry goose, was definitely older than she looked, and could find a cure for your toothache using nothing but moss, garlic, and a whisper in Latin. You're ushered into her cottage, which is more of a potion-scented greenhouse with a roof. Herbs hang from the ceiling in what may or may not be a wind chime of potential side effects. The fireplace simmers with something brown, bubbly, and unsettlingly cheerful. She waves you toward a stool and asks what's ailing you. You mention a sore back. She nods without looking. She's already grinding something into a powder while muttering about tight spleens and vengeful kidneys. She hands you a sachet filled with dried lavender, chamomile, fennel, and something labeled only as "don't worry about it." You hang it around your neck like a medieval aromatherapy grenade. Instantly sneeze yourself into a small religious crisis. But over the next few days, something shifts. Your back stops screaming. Your digestion improves. Your nightmares about talking sheep decrease. Maybe it's magic. Maybe it's medicinal. Maybe you're just scared of disappointing her and your brain got in line. These herb women weren't just medieval pharmacists. They were therapists, midwives, astrologers, and local weather forecasters. They knew which roots to use for toothaches, which leaves helped fevers, and which combinations might accidentally summon a storm. Their knowledge was passed down through generations, not written in books, but whispered, practiced, perfected through centuries of trial, error, and probably a few unfortunate goats. They carried little pouches full of dried plants, some common, like mint and rosemary, others more suspicious. Foxglove, mandrake, even henbane if you were really unlucky or really fun at parties. You'd be given teas, poultices, smoke bundles, or tinctures to sip under the full moon. And no matter what, there was always one final instruction. Don't tell the bishop, because the line between healer and heretic was flexible. The same woman who cured your plague sore on Tuesday could be accused of witchcraft on Wednesday if a baby cried at the wrong moment. But that didn't stop people from going to her. Because when the local barber surgeon offered to balance your humors with a leech and a stick, the herb woman offered you peppermint tea, a nap, and a prayer to Saint Fiacre. Easy choice. She didn't just heal the body, she soothed the soul. A little basil under your pillow, a bay leaf in your boots, a charm stitched into your tunic that said, "May this fool avoid gout and drama." Did it work? Maybe. Did it feel like it did? Absolutely. And yes, sometimes her cures were nonsense. Sometimes they were just elaborate excuses to feed you licorice root and gossip. But other times, more often than you'd think, they worked. Because nature is weird. People are weirder. And desperation is the mother of invention, or at least of chamomile compresses and theories about bees that read dreams. You return to her cottage a week later, back pain gone, sinuses clear, carrying a gift of cheese and the village's most grateful chicken. She nods, accepts both, and gives you another sachet. This one smells like hope and nutmeg. You don't ask what's in it, because, honestly, you'd rather not know. You just trust her. You trust the scarves, you trust the goose, and you especially trust whatever's in the don't worry about it jar. Your molars throb. The local healer lights a stick of wormwood and tells you to bite down. It smells like smoky despair. Your pain goes away, probably from the trauma. But hey, no more toothache. Just emotional scarring and ash breath. Toothaches in the Middle Ages were not just inconvenient, they were biblical. There were no toothbrushes, no floss, no gentle mint-flavored mouthwash promising to strengthen enamel and boost your self-esteem. Just teeth rotting slowly in real time, aided by a diet of gritty bread, old cheese, and exactly zero dental plans. And so, when your gums swell and your jaw pulses like an angry drum solo, you do what any rational medieval human would. You find someone with a cloak and a lot of herbs. Enter the local healer, who smells like smoke, judgment, and elderflower. She peers into your mouth like she's trying to read an omen in your molars, and then, without blinking, says, "Wormwood." You're handed a bundle of dried leaves. It looks harmless. It is not. She lights it on fire. The smell hits first. Earthy, bitter, like a forest on fire, while someone makes regrettable soup. She waves it near your face and then calmly instructs you to bite the smoke. This, apparently, is science. You do as instructed. The smoke curls into your mouth, sears your tongue, and hits the sore tooth like a fiery herbal exorcism. You gag, you cry. You possibly glimpse a memory from your childhood, and then it stops. The pain is gone. Sort of. Technically, it's been replaced by the feeling of being mildly smoked, like a festive ham, but the throb is gone. Wormwood contains compounds like thujone, which can have numbing and antiseptic effects. In the right amount, it might reduce inflammation. In the wrong amount, it might reduce your ability to remember your own name. Still, it was used. Regularly. Healers would crush it, burn it, mix it with vinegar, or boil it into tea so strong it could probably clean rust off a horseshoe. Wormwood wasn't just for teeth, either. It was used for digestion, parasites, fevers, and emotional malaise that was definitely depression but didn't have a name yet. In this case, your tooth has been pacified. Temporarily. But medieval medicine is never one and done. There's always more. The healer gives you a tiny cloth pouch to hang near your jaw. Inside, more wormwood, a bit of crushed garlic, some salt, and what might be a small pebble with opinions. She tells you to sleep with it. She does not explain further. For more advanced toothaches, meaning you've screamed for 3 days and your face is swelling like cursed bread. Treatment options included hot pokers, pliers, or tying a string to the tooth and the other end to a fast-moving goat. The bar for success was low. If you didn't die, it worked. But wormwood? That was elegant. Herbal. Slightly terrifying. Yes, but still better than a blacksmith with dental ambitions. You walk home breathing through your nose. Because your mouth tastes like regret and charred licorice. But your tooth isn't throbbing. Your head isn't spinning. You feel, if not great, at least stable enough to make soup and not cry into it. Later, at the tavern, someone complains about a sore gum. You nod solemnly. You tell them about the burning stick. They laugh. Then they wince. Then they ask if you know where to find some. And just like that, you're part of the cycle. Because in the Middle Ages, healing wasn't about comfort. It was about surviving until the pain got bored and left. And if that meant letting your mouth be gently set on fire by bitter herbs and optimism, so be it. Ash breath or not, you'll take it. To survive plague season, you carry an orange stuck with cloves everywhere. It smells amazing. It keeps people at a distance. You start sniffing it compulsively. You're not sick, but you are addicted to the vibe. This isn't just citrus appreciation. This is medieval survival strategy, disguised as aromatherapy. Your orange, decorated with dozens of sharp little cloves, is known as a pomander, and in the Middle Ages, it was both a fashionable accessory and your best line of defense against the mysterious death cloud that everyone was pretty sure was trying to murder them. See, people didn't know about bacteria, or viruses, or the existence of sneaky little microbes turning your lungs into goo. What they did believe in, however, was miasma theory, the idea that bad smells carried illness. So if death had a stench, then sweet smells must protect you. Logic, medieval logic, but still. And so, you get your hands on an orange. Not easy. Citrus was an imported luxury, the kind of thing you had to buy from a traveling merchant who also sold silk, scandal, and possibly lies. You carefully poke dozens of cloves, dried flower buds of a tropical tree, into its skin. You carry it on a chain, in a pouch, or just cradle it like a tiny, fragrant, emotional support fruit. It starts off functional. You wave it under your nose as you pass the sick house. You clutch it during particularly suspicious coughs. You sniff it whenever someone mentions buboes in casual conversation. But somewhere along the line you fall in love with the smell. It's rich, warm, spicy, like Christmas and self-confidence. You start inventing reasons to use it. You lean into crowds, only to recoil dramatically and inhale your pomander like a Victorian heroine near a fainting couch. You offer it to strangers not for protection but to show off. Oh, this? Just my imported citrus clove orb. Helps with the plague. And vibes. Eventually, it's not just about disease. It's about control. You can't stop the plague. You can't make your neighbor stop bleeding from the eyes. But you can inhale a clove-stuffed orange and pretend, for a moment, that you're fine, that you're safe, that you smell better than anyone within 100-yard radius. And, surprisingly, it wasn't entirely nonsense. Cloves have antimicrobial properties. They contain eugenol, which can dull pain and kill bacteria. Not enough to cure the Black Death, but enough to slightly reduce your chance of throwing up from whatever was leaking out of your local cesspit. Pomanders came in many forms. The wealthy had ornate metal globes filled with resin and spice. The poor made do with apples or wax balls embedded with herbs. Some recipes included rose petals, nutmeg, ambergris, or powdered unicorn horn, aka whatever smelled expensive. Others were soaked in vinegar and strung on necklaces, doubling as fashion statements and low-grade gas masks. Yours becomes a fixture of your identity. You don't go anywhere without it. You sleep with it near your pillow. You sniff it before meals. You whisper secrets to it. You don't know when it became your best friend, but it has. And honestly, you're okay with that. Your friends notice. One asks if you're sniffing the orb too much. You laugh. Then you notice you're already holding it. Again. You shrug. Could be worse. At least you're not licking toads or trepanning your skull. And so, plague season passes. You survive, miraculously, with most of your teeth and all of your limbs. Was it luck? Was it immunity? Was it the citrus cloud you built around yourself like a medieval force field? No one knows, but you still carry your orange. It's dried out now, shriveled and dark. The cloves have lost their sting, but you keep it anyway, because in a time of chaos, fear, and bad breath, it gave you a little power, a little peace, a little sniff of something that felt like hope. You're tossed into a freezing river by a man yelling about rebirth. Apparently cold water could shock the humors into balance, or just make you forget what was wrong. It was medieval hydrotherapy. Cold, wet, and wildly unconsensual. This, somehow, is supposed to heal you. There's no warning. One moment you're explaining your headache to a man with a tunic full of twigs and aggressive opinions, and the next, you're airborne. The river is not just cold, it is prehistoric, glacial. It punches the air out of your lungs and the thoughts out of your brain. For a moment, you're not sick. You're just awake in the most hostile way possible. This was the magic of medieval water cures. Known broadly as hydrotherapy, it was the belief that water, especially very cold water, could shock the body back into health. Because nothing says healing like a liquid assault on your nervous system. The logic was rooted in humoral theory. If your phlegm was misbehaving, or your black bile was throwing tantrums, a good splash might reset your system, like rebooting a Windows 95 computer by throwing it into a lake. Cold water was used for everything. Fevers, hysteria, melancholy, headaches, general malaise, and sometimes just for people being difficult. Feeling sad? River? Acting out? Bucket? Not sleeping well? Barrel dunk. It was therapy through hypothermia. You're now shivering on the riverbank. The healer is explaining how the cold purifies the body, sharpens the mind, and possibly pleases the saints. You're too busy blinking out fish trauma to reply. Your extremities have gone on strike. Your soul is halfway to migrating. To make it worse, this wasn't always done outside. Some monasteries and hospitals had dedicated plunge pools, small, deep tubs of icy water that looked inviting right up until the moment you were forcibly baptized into shock therapy. In wealthier homes, barrels or stone tubs were filled with water straight from the well. The colder, the better. Steam? Comfort? That's how diseases hide. And of course, no medieval treatment would be complete without some spiritual guilt. Water, after all, symbolized cleansing and rebirth. The idea was that illness came from sin, and sin needed washing. So if you weren't feeling healed yet, maybe you weren't screaming hard enough. Some healers added herbs, lavender, mint, rosemary, but not for warmth, just for the smell. Because nothing says healing like smelling like a well-garnished salad while your teeth chatter themselves into Morse code. Sometimes, to really double down on the suffering, people were doused repeatedly with cold buckets while prayers were chanted. It was a vibe, a terrifying, wet, medieval vibe. And once it was over, a quick rub down with a scratchy wool towel, a sip of vinegar, and you were declared revitalized or unconscious. Either way, the treatment was a success. Back at the river, the healer offers you a second dunk just to be sure. You make a sound that's half refusal, half seal impression. He nods, satisfied. You're cured, he says, walking away while your eyebrows frost over. And here's the wild part. Some of it may have actually worked. Modern cold therapy is a thing. Ice baths can reduce inflammation. Cold water plunges can stimulate circulation and wake up the nervous system, but in the Middle Ages, they didn't know why it worked. Only that people sometimes screamed less afterward. Eventually you dry off. Your body stops vibrating. You still feel terrible, but in a different way. A way that suggests maybe your humors were too scared to misbehave again. You limp home, dripping, shivering, but oddly clear-headed. Not better, but humbled, and that, apparently, is healing. Medieval style. He thought it was just a spice. But nutmeg in large doses causes euphoria, nausea, and conversations with invisible cats. Monks experimented constantly, sometimes for healing, sometimes for visions, sometimes just because there was literally nothing else to do. Let's be honest, medieval monastery life was repetitive. Pray, read, copy texts, chant, garden, repeat. So when a shipment of exotic spices arrived, nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, the monks didn't just toss them in stew and move on. Oh no, they studied them, they brewed them, they tasted them, and occasionally they got weird. Enter Brother Thomas, a pious man, a curious man, a man who looked at a fist-sized lump of dried seed and said, "How dangerous could this be?" The answer, as it turns out, is extremely. Nutmeg was expensive. Really expensive. Imported from the Banda Islands, it was worth more than its weight in silver. But if you were a monk in a well-connected abbey, you might get your hands on some. Technically, it was used in medicines, just a pinch to calm digestion. A little to treat plague breath, maybe a sprinkle to ward off melancholy. Brother Thomas didn't sprinkle. He grated half a nutmeg into his porridge and declared it an experiment in divine flavor. 3 hours later, he was speaking fluent goat. Large doses of nutmeg contain myristicin, a compound that can mess with your central nervous system. It can cause hallucinations, dizziness, dry mouth, and the distinct sensation that the walls are whispering your sins. It doesn't kick in immediately, which makes it extra dangerous, because by the time you feel anything, you've probably gone back for seconds. The monks record the incident carefully. Brother Thomas experienced divine clarity, followed by uncontrolled laughter and an extended conversation with the fireplace. Some are concerned, others are intrigued. In a world without recreational drugs, this counts as hot gossip. Soon, nutmeg is added to more things. Stews, teas, sacramental wine. Some monks report strange dreams. Others feel closer to the angels. One accidentally renames all the chickens after minor saints and refuses to explain. To be fair, the line between spiritual ecstasy and full-blown spice-induced meltdown was already pretty blurry. Medieval mysticism loved altered states. Fasting, sleep deprivation, chanting, anything to push the soul past the veil. A little nutmeg, practically training wheels. The abbot calls a meeting. There is a heated debate over whether spice-induced visions are divine or demonic. Brother Martin suggests moderation. Brother Hugo suggests cooking more rice pudding. Brother Thomas is still in the garden having a philosophical debate with a tomato plant. Eventually, they compromise. Nutmeg use is restricted to medical purposes only, which, in monastic language, means whenever someone feels weird and asks politely. A tiny jar is locked in the apothecary's cabinet, labeled caution, may induce Latin poetry. But the legend spreads. Other monasteries hear the tale. Word gets out to physicians, alchemists, and the occasional overly enthusiastic noble. Nutmeg becomes the Middle Ages' mildest party trick. Not common, not safe, but deeply fascinating. You, of course, are not a monk, but one day you're offered a sweet drink laced with nutmeg and honey. You sip it, you feel warm, relaxed, a little dreamy. You look at the cat winks. You wink back. You're not sure who started it, and just like that, you get it. Why Brother Thomas did it. Why the monks kept experimenting. Because in a world of suffering, silence, and sensory deprivation, a little spice, a little altered perception, was sometimes the only escape. Just don't overdo it. No one wants to be remembered as the guy who saw angels, spoke fluent onion, and accidentally married a chair. Moderation, dear monk. Moderation. You visit a healer who gently places a live bee on your spine. It stings you. repeatedly. You scream. She nods solemnly. That means it's working. Bee venom was used as a cure for inflammation or revenge. It's unclear. This, apparently, is called apitherapy, the medieval art of using bees for medicinal purposes. Not honey, not beeswax, the actual bees, specifically their butts. Because when everything hurts and nothing makes sense, the logical next step is to weaponize pollinators. The healer, her name might be Agatha, or possibly Please Stop, coaxes the bee from a little clay pot. She hums as she does it. She's very calm. You are not. She assures you that the sting will rebalance the fire in your spine and teach the pain humility. You're pretty sure it's just going to hurt, but you're desperate. Chronic pain in the Middle Ages was an everyday horror. There were no chiropractors, no muscle relaxants, no ergonomic chairs. If your back ached, you had two options: live with it or let someone do something deeply medieval about it. Enter the bees. The idea behind bee venom therapy wasn't entirely nonsense. Bee venom contains melittin, a compound that causes inflammation at the sting site, but also triggers the body to produce anti-inflammatory responses. In modern science, this is a thing. In medieval times, it was more of the pain cancels out other pain situation. The first sting makes you gasp. The second one feels like lightning. By the third, you're reassessing your life choices and wondering if this is just a very elaborate prank. Agatha is humming louder now. She says the bees like the sound. You are unconvinced. After 5 stings, she wraps you in a wool blanket and gives you a cup of warm dandelion tea. You tremble, possibly from venom, possibly from emotion. Your spine? Still sore, but slightly less so. Or maybe it's just in shock. She explains that bee therapy isn't just for back pain. It's also used for arthritis, gout, joint stiffness, and general stubbornness of the limbs. Some monks believed it could cure paralysis. Some villagers thought it scared away bad spirits. Others were just trying not to die of boredom. You ask how often this needs to be done. She replies, "Until the bees tell me to stop," reassuring. You look around the hut. Jars of honey glint in the light. Beeswax candles flicker. A fat bumblebee naps on a cushion. It occurs to you that this isn't just a healer. It's a bee cult. A very polite, slightly unhinged bee cult with good lighting. Later that night, your back feels tingly. Not painful, not great. Just weird. Your skin is swollen. Your muscles are humming. You feel like your spine is playing a harp made of regret. But strangely, something inside you has shifted. Your posture is better. You're breathing deeper. Your trust in bees, complicated. The next day, you see Agatha again. She greets you with a smile and another pot of bees. You freeze. She nods toward your lower back. They missed a spot. You sigh, take off your tunic, and brace yourself. You're not sure if this is healing, madness, or simply a very intense version of pest control, but you do know that for one glorious moment yesterday, your back stopped screaming, and in the Middle Ages, that was good enough. So you lie down, you take a deep breath, and you accept your fate. Because sometimes, to get rid of the pain, you have to be the pain. Buzz, buzz. You're handed a paste made from emerald dust and deer bone. It's supposed to cure insomnia. You're not sure if it's helping, but your mouth tastes like you licked a haunted gemstone. And now you're slightly radioactive with class. This, somehow, is medicine. Emeralds were luxury, mystery, and medieval prescription strength nonsense, all rolled into one sparkly green rock. In the Middle Ages, gemstones weren't just status symbols, they were believed to hold powerful energies, not metaphorically, literally. If your humors were unbalanced, if your dreams were restless, if your blood was being sassy, crushed minerals might be the cure. and nothing screamed elite insomnia solution like taking a rock worth more than your village and grinding it into powder. The theory was simple. Gemstones were pure, perfect, and made by the earth itself, which meant they could absorb negative energy, repel evil, or, if ground up into a fine paste and smeared on your face, make your liver behave. Especially emeralds. Emeralds were the overachievers of the medieval crystal kingdom. They were believed to protect against poison, calm the mind, improve memory, and in some cases, let you see the future. You're given the paste by a very confident apothecary who definitely has a side hustle in astrology. The paste is grey-green, grainy, and smells faintly of disappointment and deer marrow. You ask how it's made. He says, "We mix emerald dust with bone ash and a touch of basilisk bile." You ask if he's joking. He is not. Still, you're desperate. You haven't slept in 3 nights. Your dreams are just loops of monks yelling about sin. So you smear the emerald paste under your eyes and swallow a pea-sized lump with a bit of spiced wine. It tastes like betrayal, and then you wait. The effects are subtle. Your jaw tingles. Your tongue feels like it's wearing a tiny wool sweater. You blink twice and suddenly remember the name of your second-grade teacher. You're either cured or entering a very expensive coma. Emerald therapy wasn't just for sleep. It was recommended for epilepsy, heart palpitations, poison protection, and even overthinking. Rich people loved it. If you were a noble and your body hurt, the solution was rarely eat vegetables. It was rub rubies on it and scream into a pearl. Some apothecaries even had mineral catalogues listing which precious stones to use for which ailment. Sapphire for the eyes, topaz for fevers, onyx for depression, and emeralds? Emeralds were your go-to for anything that made you feel unglamorous. They were the medieval equivalent of chamomile tea, Xanax, and a spa weekend, all at once. Of course, the poor couldn't afford crushed emeralds. They were more likely to chew willow bark and hope. But among the elite, gemstone medicine was peak wellness. And the best part? If you didn't feel better, it wasn't because the cure didn't work. It was because your soul lacked refinement. You lie down, paste still crusting gently around your nostrils. The apothecary dims the torches and chants something in Latin that may or may not be about your cholesterol. You drift into sleep, not because of the emeralds, but because the stress of having ingested powdered jewelry has finally broken your spirit. You dream of a green deer whispering tax advice. You wake up confused, slightly sparkly, and weirdly calm. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't, but you do feel richer. Or at least like someone who should own a cloak with embroidery. And in a world where medicine often involved leeches, hot pokers, or mud enemas, getting mildly high on emeralds and deer ash, honestly, that's practically self-care. You drink something black and grainy. It's charcoal, meant to absorb poison and purify the body. You're unsure if it's working, but at least you look goth and mysterious, like a sick Victorian poet. This is not a prank, nor is it some edgy new beverage trend sponsored by Plague-era Instagram. It's science, medieval science, which means it's 1 part logic, 2 parts panic, and 8 parts someone yelling balance the humors while aggressively grinding tree bark. Charcoal, also known as black stuff that's not quite dirt, was believed to soak up poisons from the stomach like a moody little sponge. You could make it by burning wood until it crumbled, then grinding it into a fine powder, mixing it with water or wine, and chugging it like you meant it. It was gritty. It was bitter. It was basically a medieval smoothie with the consistency of sand and the flavor of your worst decisions. The moment it hits your tongue, you realize something important. This was not made with love. It tastes like someone brewed regret in an old boot. But you keep drinking because you've eaten something questionable, possibly a mushroom, definitely not a chicken, and this is your last hope before your internal organs start holding a protest. And yet, charcoal wasn't total nonsense. Even today, Activated charcoal is used in modern medicine to treat certain kinds of poisoning. It binds to toxins and stops them from being absorbed. But back then, no one knew why it worked. They just noticed that sometimes, after drinking black sludge, people stopped screaming, which, in medieval healthcare, was practically a miracle. You wipe your mouth and stare at the apothecary. He nods approvingly. He's wearing 12 necklaces all made of teeth. You don't ask whose. He tells you the charcoal will also balance your humors, protect you from bad dreams, and possibly improve your singing voice. Again, science. As the mixture settles in your stomach like volcanic ash, you're instructed to lie down and let the evil settle. You do. You feel vaguely cursed, but somehow cleaner. Purged. Like your digestive tract just went to confession. Charcoal was a favorite among traveling healers and potion sellers. It was cheap to make, easy to carry, and made people feel like they were doing something, which, let's be honest, was half the point of medieval medicine. Did it work? Maybe. Did it look like it worked? Absolutely. There's something psychologically soothing about drinking, something that looks like it could patch a roof, and it wasn't just for poison. Charcoal was handed out for stomach aches, fevers, and hangovers. Nobles might add it to wine. Peasants might stir it into gruel. One particularly enthusiastic bishop claimed it could drive out demons through the bowels. We don't ask questions. Side effects? Oh, there were some. Let's just say the next morning, you're not going anywhere fast. Your insides feel like they've been scoured with a haunted broom. But your skin is clear. Your soul feels rebooted. And you're hydrated, technically. You walk through the village, your lips still faintly dusted with black grit. Someone asks if you're in mourning. You say no, just purging. They nod respectfully. No follow-up questions. You might not be healthy, you might not be healed. But for one brief, chalky moment, you are mysterious. Like a poet, with indigestion and excellent posture. And in the Middle Ages, that was practically enlightenment. You down a cup of vinegar mixed with garlic. You instantly regret every decision that led you here. Your sinuses clear. Your stomach flips. Your neighbor nods approvingly. Vinegar was the go-to medieval cleanse. Detoxifying, decalcifying, dehumanizing. It hits your throat like a vengeful potion. The garlic is aggressive, the vinegar sharper than a noblewoman's glare, and the aftertaste could strip paint off a pew. But this, allegedly, is healing. Because in the Middle Ages, vinegar wasn't just for preserving food or pickling whatever you couldn't afford to throw out. It was a panacea, a universal solvent, a drink, a cure, a disinfectant, a deodorant, and, if mixed with the right herbs, a spicy little death threat to your internal parasites. Doctors, monks, housewives, and street healers all swore by it. Vinegar was believed to cleanse the humors, balance bile, and chase away corruption. If your body was struggling under the weight of sin, infection, or just a really bad decision involving undercooked mutton, a vinegar shot would supposedly burn it all away, spiritually and otherwise. You're given the drink by a neighbor named Mad Agnes. She says it'll purify your organs and cure your night terrors. She also says it keeps demons out of your armpits. You decide not to question the science. She hands you a cup made of wood and regret. You sip. Your vision sharpens. Your ancestors feel personally attacked. You're not sure what just happened, but your ears are ringing and you can suddenly remember every mistake you've ever made. This, they say, is the toxins leaving your body. Vinegar was also used as a base for Four Thieves vinegar, a medieval plague remedy made by soaking herbs like rosemary, thyme, and sage in vinegar. Legend says 4 thieves used it to rob the homes of plague victims without getting sick. Was it effective? Maybe. Was it mostly an excuse to rub salad dressing on your face during a pandemic? Absolutely. And vinegar wasn't just for drinking. It was applied to wounds, poured into bath water, soaked into cloths, and used to rinse sore mouths. Some even added it to eye drops. Because why not take a substance that already smells like a betrayal and put it in your eyes? You try asking how much vinegar is safe to drink. Mad Agnes says, as much as you can scream through. Encouraging. You've also heard tales of warriors drinking vinegar to strengthen their blood, of monks fasting with vinegar tonics, of noble women sipping it delicately with honey and rose petals, turning the world's harshest cleanse into a tiny floral punishment. You begin to realize that vinegar, in the Middle Ages, was more than just a liquid. It was a lifestyle, the medieval equivalent of a detox juice cleanse, but with fewer Instagram filters and more spiritual dread. Later that day, your stomach feels like it's been scoured with a holy loofah. Your breath could kill a minor curse. Your neighbor says you're glowing. You think you might be dying or ascending, but here's the thing, you do feel lighter. Maybe it's placebo. Maybe it's dehydration. Maybe vinegar truly did cleanse something. Not just the body, but the soul, or at least your digestive tract. You go to sleep with a belly full of acid and garlic fumes seeping from your pores. You dream of floating above your village, shouting recipes to confused birds. You wake up with clear sinuses, an empty colon, and the sense that you've survived something holy and mildly traumatic. And when someone asks what helped, you smile faintly, your teeth slightly etched from acid, and say, "Just a little vinegar," and a lot of bad choices. You pass a man mumbling to himself, rubbing soil on his gums. He claims the earth speaks to him. Surprisingly, he's never sick. Maybe he's onto something. Or maybe he's just very committed to the local dirt-based lifestyle. His name is probably something dramatic, like Thistle Hugh or Bogmoth. No one knows where he came from. Some say he used to be a scribe. Others say he was struck by lightning during Lent and just never fully reset. What's clear is that Hugh, let's go with Hugh, is now your village's unofficial herbalist, shaman, and dirt philosopher. And look, you've mocked him before. Everyone has. Until you got food poisoning from a questionable sausage and Hugh handed you a clump of what he called holy loam. You were desperate, so you rubbed a little on your wrist and whispered your name into it like he said, and somehow you didn't die. Coincidence? Maybe, but now you flinch a little less when you see him licking tree bark for answers. Here's the thing. While Hugh might be unhinged, he's not entirely wrong. In the Middle Ages, terra sigillata, literally sealed earth, was a thing. A type of medicinal clay, often dug from specific sacred hills and stamped with official seals. It was used to treat poison, digestive issues, and even plague symptoms. Rich people imported it. Apothecaries sold it ground up and mixed with rosewater, and peasants, if they were lucky, just dug up a patch of blessed dirt behind the local chapel and hoped it wasn't actually where Brother Alan was buried. Hugh, though, has taken it a step further. He claims the soil sings at dawn and that worms are just doctors without hats. No one's quite sure what that means, but he hasn't had so much as a sniffle in 10 years. Meanwhile, the rest of you are fighting off the latest wave of medieval lung regret with a sock full of nettles and a prayer. Today, Hugh is kneeling in a field, gently patting the ground and muttering about its warm humours. You ask if he's found anything helpful. He grins, 5 teeth missing, and hands you a small cloth pouch. "Dirt," he says solemnly. You ask what kind. "All of them." You open it. It smells like wet leaves, stubborn wisdom, and possibly goat. He tells you to inhale deeply. Against all better judgment, you do. It smells grounding. Medieval medicine often leaned heavily on nature. Not just plants, but earth itself. Clay was eaten, applied to wounds, mixed with herbs, or used in rituals to pull sickness downward, as if illness was a bad tenant you could evict through your feet. And it wasn't just superstition. Certain clays contain kaolin, which can help with diarrhea and bind to toxins. Some soil has antibacterial properties. And then, of course, there's the placebo effect, which in medieval terms is just faith with a hobby. You begin to carry Hugh's dirt pouch, just in case. When someone sneezes near you, you give it a little sniff. When your back hurts, you sprinkle a bit in your shoes. Is it doing anything? Who knows? But your dreams are calmer, your bowels are less rebellious, and you've developed a strange affection for earthworms. You're still not rubbing dirt on your gums. Yet, one day, Hugh tells you the soil likes you. You thank him. He nods and goes back to whispering at a molehill. You may not be cured, but you feel a little closer to the earth, a little steadier. And in a world filled with sickness, superstition, and soup that might betray you at any moment, there's comfort in knowing that at least the dirt's on your side, or under it. Either way, you're covered. Your apothecary hands you a bowl of something that smells like burnt leather and confidence. You ask what's in it. He says, Viper. You nod like that makes sense. Medieval physicians believed snake meat could warm the blood and clear away infections. In reality, it mostly cleared your appetite and possibly your bowels. Still, you're not in a position to argue. You've been coughing for 3 days, your joints ache, and your last sneeze may have frightened a monk into retirement. So when the apothecary offers a steaming bowl of snake soup and says, "Drink this and fear no plague," you roll up your sleeves and brace your taste buds for impact. The first sip hits like betrayal. It's oily, earthy, and inexplicably crunchy. The texture is a little too enthusiastic, like something in the bowl is still trying to crawl away from your spoon. You chew, you regret, you swallow anyway, because in the Middle Ages, dignity was not a priority, survival was. The logic behind viper broth goes deep into the roots of medieval medicine. Physicians believed that because snakes shed their skin and renew themselves, they must be full of life force. If you could consume that force, preferably with a side of stale bread, you might absorb their regenerative powers, or at the very least, not die this week. Plus, snakes were considered hot and dry in humoral terms. If your body was too cold and wet, say from a lingering fever or excessive melancholy, snake meat was the culinary equivalent of setting your bloodstream on fire and hoping the infection gave up. Some recipes called for boiling the entire snake, bones and all. Others instructed you to skin it, season it with herbs, and stew it with wine. In the more luxurious versions, viper was served with leeks or almonds. None of this helped. It still tasted like something your nightmares would politely decline. The apothecary watches you slurp it down with the calm of a man who's heard too many screams to be surprised anymore. He tells you that emperors once used viper extract as a tonic, that it was a symbol of power and immunity. You nod, lips greasy, with regret. You ask what happens next. He says, you'll sweat, possibly see visions. That means it's working. Comforting, hours later, you are, in fact, sweating. You're also hallucinating a conversation between your toes. Your stomach has entered a phase of medieval protest known as the purge, and your blood feels like it's humming Gregorian chants. But weirdly, your cough is gone. Either the viper broth worked, or your body has given up on feeling anything except confusion, and you wouldn't be alone. Viper-based remedies were everywhere. Powders made from dried snake flesh, snake-infused oils rubbed on sores, even snake wine, where a serpent was steeped in alcohol and then sipped like it was fine brandy instead of a glass of danger. These treatments were handed out for everything from plague to gout to impotence. Some doctors swore by them. Others just swore when patients projectile vomited across the apothecary. Eventually, your body stabilizes. You're not better, but you're upright. Your cough is gone, replaced by an overwhelming desire never to look at a snake again. The apothecary offers you a second helping. You decline, respectfully, forever. As you walk home, slightly dizzy, mildly cleansed, and weirdly proud, you realize you've just participated in the most medieval wellness trend of all: aggressive animal-based optimism. You might not have cured your illness, but you've certainly terrified it. And in the Middle Ages, that counts. You're at Mass. The priest offers communion wine. It's suspiciously strong. You're not sure if you're closer to God or just 3 cups deep into something that tastes like a liquid migraine. Monastic wine was often high-proof, technically medicinal, and spiritually overwhelming. Some folks went to confession just to sneak a refill. And yes, you've made a face. Everyone does the first time. But you swallow, because this is holy wine, and spitting it out might qualify as heresy. You feel a gentle warmth in your chest, then in your cheeks, then in your knees. By the time the choir starts up again, you're feeling very moved, possibly by the Holy Spirit, possibly by the alcohol content. Monasteries were not just centers of prayer and scribing, they were, for centuries, the best wineries in Europe. While peasants drank weak, cloudy ale from moldy jugs, monks were out here pressing grapes with divine precision. They had the land, the time, and the resources to make wine that was, frankly, too good for its intended purpose. Sure, it was supposed to represent the blood of Christ, but sometimes it also tasted like the blood of Dionysus. And when your daily life includes cold stone floors, plague, and the occasional Viking raid, you're not going to say no to a wine that numbs the soul and the shins. Monks, especially in France, Germany, and Italy, became masters of viticulture. They tracked grape varieties, soil conditions, fermentation methods. They prayed over barrels. They invented better ways to age, store, and flavor the stuff. And while they claimed it was all for spiritual and medicinal use, let's just say some of those medicine cabinets had tasting notes. You, as a humble villager, are not supposed to get more than a tiny sip at communion. But if you're lucky, or if you fake an existential crisis, you might get invited to the back room, the monastic wine cellar, dark, cool, smelling of oak and secrets. This is where the good stuff lives. The for emergencies only bottles. The vintages that were definitely blessed, and also definitely aged for flavor. A monk named Brother Anselm hands you a goblet. He calls it Street Catherine's Remedy. You take a sip. It's smooth, complex, slightly spiced. You feel your joints loosen. You also feel like telling him about every bad decision you've made since age 6. Confession wine, he says, nodding. People came to monasteries for healing, both spiritual and physical. Wine was used as a preservative, a solvent, and a tonic. It was infused with herbs, bark, resin, basically whatever the apothecary had lying around. Some brews were tart, others were syrupy. A few were strong enough to knock out a small horse. If you were sick, sad, or even just bored, wine was the answer. The church maintained, of course, that moderation was key. Drunkenness was a sin, but medicinal relaxation was just fine, as long as you were still capable of mumbling a prayer or two. Back at Mass, you realize something troubling. You've taken communion twice, maybe 3 times. Your memory is fuzzy. The priest is giving you side-eye. The statue of Street. Sebastian seems to be winking. Time to leave. You stumble out into the courtyard, spiritually cleansed and physically swaying. A nun pats your shoulder and says, "Some of us come for God. Some of us come for the grape." You nod, solemnly. You've seen the light. And it's rosé. By evening, the headache arrives. Pounding. Biblical. You drink a basin of water and whisper an apology to your liver. But even as your skull throbs, you know you'll be back next Sunday, because sometimes the body of Christ comes with just the right bouquet. And in the Middle Ages, that was holy enough. You're restless. You can't sleep. The village healer gives you boiled lettuce water. It tastes like regret with a hint of leaf, but 10 minutes later, you're out cold. Lettuce was considered a gentle sedative, and if that didn't work, they'd just whack you with a turnip until you calmed down. This isn't a bedtime snack. It's medieval pharmacology. And it starts with salad soup. The healer says it will soothe the heat of the heart and quiet the wayward spirit. You nod solemnly, because that sounds nice. And because you don't have the energy to argue. You've been lying in bed for hours, eyes open, heart racing, brain replaying every minor social mistake since the Maypole Festival of '43. So, lettuce at Island. She hands you a steaming wooden cup filled with slightly greenish water. A few leaves bob on top like they've survived a flood and are not thrilled to still be here. You sniff. It smells like soggy garden and broken promises. You sip. It's warm, wet. Somehow both flavorless and offensive. But you drink it anyway, because insomnia is a powerful motivator and you've run out of sheep to count. In the Middle Ages, lettuce wasn't just for crunchy garnish or Roman orgies. It was medicine. According to the doctrine of humors, lettuce was cold and moist, qualities associated with calmness, sleep, and not punching someone in the marketplace because you're overtired. It was thought to cool an overheated brain and settle an excitable liver. The Roman author Pliny wrote extensively about lettuce's sleep-inducing properties, which the medieval world inherited and enthusiastically exaggerated. Boiling it was key. Raw lettuce might freshen your breath, but boiled lettuce had mystical bedtime powers. Add a pinch of mint or a dash of vinegar, and you were practically drinking a lullaby. You begin to feel it, a heavy warmth behind your eyes. Your limbs soften. Your jaw unclenches. The healer smiles as you blink slowly, like a cow falling into a nap, and just like that, you're out. But boiled lettuce wasn't the only medieval remedy for sleeplessness. If the salad tea failed, things escalated quickly. Lavender tucked under your pillow, poppies crushed and mixed with honey, or, in more intense cases, a whack to the back of the head with a soothing object, like a turnip or a rolled-up salter. One monk even recommended sleeping with a warm rock wrapped in flannel, whispered over with calming prayers. Another suggested walking in circles until your soul got bored and drifted off. You try not to imagine how many sleepless peasants were just wandering the fields at 3 a.m., clutching root vegetables and mumbling lullabies to themselves. But tonight, the lettuce works. You wake up 8 hours later, draped in a thin film of sweat and vague lettuce scent. Your brain feels scrubbed. Your joints creak less. Your soul is quiet. The healer nods when she sees you. "Good batch," she says. The lettuce listened. You're not sure what that means. You're also not going to ask. Back in your own home, you look at the garden. Lettuce grows in a crooked row, looking smug. You pick a few leaves for later. Maybe it's placebo. Maybe it's medieval magic. Or maybe, just maybe, you've stumbled across the world's most boring superpower, the power of slightly warm salad water. You don't care. You're rested. And in a time when insomnia couldn't be cured with melatonin gummies or true crime podcasts, a leafy broth that sends you gently into the void, that's a miracle, even if it does taste like compost tea. You've got a rash. The cure? A steaming pile of cow dung, lovingly applied to your skin with a rag that might have once been someone's underpants. The logic? Heat draws out illness. The result? You smell like a barn, but hey, your rash is either gone or just hiding in shame. You're lying flat on your back, questioning your life choices as someone you trust, loosely, slaps a warm, fragrant blob of fermented cow brunch directly onto your inflamed thigh. The healer calls it a poultice. You call it betrayal with a squelch. In the Middle Ages, cow dung was considered one of nature's most versatile medical substances. It was warm. It was moist. It came in generous supply. And it had the magical combination of looking medicinal while also ensuring no one would come near you long enough to ask follow-up questions. The theory was simple. Heat draws out infection, and the fibrous matter absorbs the bad humors. So naturally, why not grab the nearest steaming pile of pastoral potential and rub it into your lymph nodes. You ask the healer how long you're supposed to lie here. She says, "Until the rash repents." You're not sure if that's a joke or part of the actual treatment plan. Either way, the poultice is beginning to cool. The smell, however, is gaining momentum. You try to stay still, like a noble patient trusting in centuries of trial and error medicine. But you can't help wondering, how many people got better after this? And how many just pretended to so they wouldn't have to do it again? Truth is, dung-based remedies weren't limited to rashes. Oh no. Cow dung was also used for infected wounds, bruises, and even childbirth. In some areas, dried dung was powdered and mixed with oil for burns. Fresh dung was applied to inflamed joints. There were even recipes combining it with herbs to make holy balms. Some monks documented these treatments without blinking. Apply warm dung to the afflicted part, one 12th century manuscript reads, and bind tightly with a strip of linen. Translation: Congratulations. You now smell like you lost a wrestling match with a cow's breakfast. But, and this is important, it sometimes worked. Why? Because the warmth increased circulation. The pressure reduced swelling. And cow dung is naturally full of bacteria, some of which, when dried or aged, may have produced mild antibacterial effects. Or maybe it was just the fear of smelling like a compost heap forever that encouraged your immune system to get it together. Still, there were risks. Occasionally, someone used the wrong kind of dung. You'd be amazed how picky the healing arts were about feces. Or applied it to an open wound and ended up with a different problem entirely. Like death, but in a world with no antibiotics, no antiseptics, and no boundaries. Cow dung was just one more tool in the medieval medicine chest, next to leeches, boiled frogs, and jars of mystery salve that may or may not have once contained a saint's toenail. After half an hour, the poultice is peeled off. Your skin is redder, but slightly less itchy. You smell like someone left a hay bale in the rain. The healer nods. "It's working," she says. You don't feel better, but you do feel like you've been through something. You head home, holding your head high and your arms slightly out to the side to avoid spreading the scent. The villagers part like the sea. You tell them it's for healing. They nod respectfully and take 5 steps back. Later, you realize your rash has faded. Or maybe it moved to avoid the smell. Either way, it's progress. And in the Middle Ages, if you could heal without bleeding out, hallucinating, or starting a fire, that was a 5-star treatment. Even if it came straight from the cow, you're coughing. Naturally, the healer burns dried grapevines and has you inhale the smoke through a funnel made from sheep intestine. It smells like burned raisins and failure, but you do feel different. Vine smoke was believed to clear lung infections. It also cleared your will to live. Briefly, you didn't ask for this. You just mentioned that your chest was tight, your breathing was raspy, and now here you are, mouth open like a fish, sucking in the Middle Ages answer to flavored mist. Vine smoke, gently wafting through what appears to be a recycled sausage casing. The healer calls it purification. You call it experimental agriculture. She says the smoke will enter your lungs, banish the bad air, and rebalance your humors. She also says it's important to stay very, very still, or you'll ruin the smoke spiral. You're not sure what that means, but she seems serious, and she's holding a burning stick near your face. So, like a good patient, you inhale. Your first breath tastes like toasted vineyard and mild betrayal. Your second breath makes your eyes water. By the third, your sinuses are crying out in Old French. But, somehow, your chest does feel looser. Your lungs are now full of artisanal carbon. But at least they're not wheezing anymore. Vine smoke therapy wasn't just a village thing. It was recommended in some medical texts by actual physicians. The logic was as smoky as the treatment. Lungs filled with bad humors could be smoked clean, much like how you'd chase rats out of a barn. Except in this case, you were the barn, and the rats were bronchitis. Different vines had different vibes. Grapevines were popular for their cleansing properties, and because they were everywhere, other herbs might be added for flavor, effect, or just dramatic smoke color. Rosemary for clarity. Sage for spiritual interference. Thyme for people who really wanted their lungs to smell like stew. And let's talk about the delivery system. The funnel you're using isn't made of metal or wood. Oh no. It's a length of dried sheep gut, cured and hollowed, then bent into a loose spiral because, according to the healer, the smoke needs to dance before it heals. You don't have the heart to question her process. As the smoke swirls in, you begin to drift a little, not in a good way, more in a why is the ceiling moving way. The healer fans the smoke toward your face like it's perfume. You ask if you should stop. She says no, but if you begin to speak in tongues, she'll get the priest. You make it through the full treatment, 12 inhales, 3 gagging coughs, and 1 out-of-body experience where you briefly believed you were a goose. Your cough has stopped, replaced by a sort of smoky silence. You're not better, but you're also not asking questions anymore. Later, you sit outside in the cool air, rethinking your entire immune system. Your voice is now half an octave lower. You smell like a cursed fruitcake. And you're 50% sure your lungs are asking for union representation. But oddly, you do feel a little clearer, lighter, like the smoke might have scared the illness out of you, or at least confused it enough to leave. Medieval medicine often walked a line between ritual and roasting. Smoke was spiritual, purifying, and practical. It kept bugs away, masked body odor, and made you feel like something was happening, even if that something was just your eyebrows singing off. As you trudge home, still tasting vineyard ash and existential dread, you see your neighbor starting a vine fire of his own. You nod. He nods. You're part of the club now. Congratulations. You've just taken your first hit of medieval vape culture. And in a world without antibiotics, cough drops, or urgent care clinics, sometimes all you could do was light something on fire and hope for the best. So tonight, as you sink into your clean sheets and drift off beside a nightstand that probably doesn't have a jar of leeches on it, let's take a moment to honor the absolutely unhinged pharmaceutical journey we just witnessed. You survived the snake broth. You tasted the poppy wine. You licked a toad and maybe, just maybe, talked to a shrub about your childhood trauma. And you made it through a world where healthcare meant chewing mushrooms that made your shadow scream. The people of the Middle Ages didn't have access to vaccines, antibiotics, or even basic germ theory. But what they did have was an endless supply of bravery, desperation, and the ability to convince themselves that screaming vegetables and fermented goat spit were probably worth a shot. And somehow, against all odds and all poisons, they survived. They built, farmed, prayed, partied, and parented under the influence of herbs, roots, powders, fumes, and questionable soup. Every single one of them was basically doing medieval karaoke on hard mode, while slightly hallucinating. So, if you're lying awake, worried about modern things, emails, taxes, the existential dread of a group text, just remember, at least no one's offered to trepan your skull to balance your humors. Be grateful for toothpaste, for Tylenol, for the ability to Google whether or not that mushroom you found is actually food. Because history may be gross and terrifying, but it's also proof that humans are stubborn, hopeful, and kind of ridiculous. Good night, traveler of time. May your dreams be free of sulfur smoke and herbal enemas. And may your ancestors, who somehow survived all this, rest in deeply confused, extremely medicated peace.